Okay, now I'm going to talk about controllers. And spacebar again, I'm going to go to the side view. Now controllers are made up of NURBS curves. We've added the curves, the EP curve tool here with the options. Now if you reset it, the default is a 3-degree curve or cubic. What that means is you can come in and you could draw these NURBS curves, and then I could snap to the edge there, hit enter. So I now have a curve. Now if I were to tap 3, it'll display more round, and one it's a little more chunky. So NURBS curves they're like Bezier curves that you would see in Adobe Illustrator. You can make rounded ones. You can also come in and click on linear, and then you could make straight edges. So you can get creative. Here I'm going to tap V and snap to the point. If you want to edit these, right click and go to Control Vertex, and then you can move the points around. So the industry standard for, and go back to object mode, the industry standard for making controllers is to use NURBS curves. And the way you'll want to use these is up here. I've got my status line here, and I've got my selection filter or selection masks. So if I come and set everything to off and then come back and just click on curves, the curve icon, so then the only thing I'm going to select is the curves. And that's very important because these are generally the only thing you're moving in a control rig, and you don't want to accidentally select joints or objects or any other elements and move those instead. This makes a rig animator friendly and less prone to breaking. Also, you can turn everything off so that you're just selecting these. If you were to render it out, they're not going to show up in a render unless you do a real-time play blast. So those are controllers. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete these, and I'm going to create just a very simple one. So I'm just going to hold down my grid snap, and this one here is going to be a foot controller. And we'll click on the G key to repeat last command. This one here, I'll just make this like an overall mover. So you can make these very uniform controls, or you can make them, let's center the pivot on that one. Or you can get creative, right mouse click, go to the control vertice, make a more nifty shape. I like to spend some time and make them a little more nifty. Sort of customize them. And I like them to make sense so that it's obvious as to what the meaning of them is. So things that rotate, I'll generally make rounded icons for controllers. Things that are more about translation, I'll usually make them more like arrows. It just, depends on what you'd like to do. So this one here, I'm just going to put up here. Let's freeze the transformations. And then let's take the pivot point and hold down V, and I'll just snap, whoops. Pivot point, V, and I'll snap it to the joint. You can use the vert snap to snap it to joints. V again. Same thing here, freeze transforms. It's also a good idea to delete the history on these, keep them clean. Okay, so there are my controllers. Okay, so for the controller, what I'm going to do is select this controller, hit Q to get out of, so I'm just in select mode, shift select the top joint. Oh, and I've turned that off, so let's turn that back on. And so let's hit point constrain, maintain offset, apply. So we can see now that this first joint has a point constraint on it. I could also do an orient constraint on it. Okay, and now what we're going to do is going to create a Q to get out of the tool. Now what we're going to do is create an IK handle. So previously we rotated the joint chain. Now if you were to animate all of your characters just by doing this in order to maybe take a step or grab something, it would be very tedious, and you would have to kind of counter rotate everything just to get in the right place. Now here I'm going to use an IK handle. Let's reset it. I'm going to use the rotate plane solver. So if we click on the top joint, click on the bottom joint in the chain, I now have an IK handle. And if I grab the IK handle, just click that there, go to move. Now I can move the joint chain around, and it's always going to try to, joints are always going to try to point to where the end node is. Now again, hit Z. When I move stuff, I test it. I always just tap Z, get right back to 0. Now, earlier I told you about the bend. So the way that works is if you've got a slight angle when you set up your joints, then that's going to be the preferred rotation axis when you have IK attached. It's going to try to bend in that direction as opposed to the other way. Okay, so now what we'll do is take this controller and we'll select the IK handle, and we'll do a point constraint, apply. So now I'm using this, and then I could come back and just turn my filter off, selection mask, so I'm only using the controller. Now that's really weird. What have I done there? Oh, okay. Last time I did a, let's undo that point constraint. In a previous video, when I did the point constraint, select this one, control, click on the IK handle, point constraint. If you recall, the last time I had it set to Y. So come back here, reset, maintain offset, apply. So now it's set for all the axes. So this would be like a typical foot setup. Now if I wanted to rotate this, I could also take the joint, now not the IK handle, but I could take the joint And let's control click on the last joint and go to orient and apply. So if I were now to orient this handle, you can see that the bottom of the cylinder is now rotating, and that's the joint that's rotating, not the I key handle. But then if I move this, the I key handle is moving with it. And so if you see a more complicated setup, that's how all that works.